main storyline that really ended up coming out of this event, and this was just this has been talked about a lot this year, a lot last year, and it's really come full circle now with what happened with Nico, is pace of play. Basically, you had I've got some, we'll start with, it's safe to say players and fans were outraged about this, but we'll start with some tweets from Drew Gibson, because that'll kind of, Drew is one of the players who's not really afraid to voice himself. So first he had,
I love listening to,
"Hey Gannon, please
Gibson
hurry
tweets.
up a little." And then you have, he said we should normalize a finished gentleman with a stopwatch at all events. I think it's fair response to 2-minute upshots. He said we finished, signed autographs, ate dinner, and we were back to our place we were staying at before our lead card finished. We were second card, over an hour behind, ? So that last card was taking forever. I mean, they were so far behind. And there's just a number of issues here. For starters, and I know a lot of it was Gannon, but I'm sure the card as a whole probably was not playing the fastest. But Gannon was definitely a big part of it, and I watched some of it and saw. And there's a lot of issues at hand here. Number one issue is basically the hypocrisy, essentially, because Nico Lacastro. Now, granted, what happened to Nico ultimately was obviously due to how he reacted to the situation.
For sure.
We're not that's very clear, but Nico was called on time because he's known as a repeat offender. So who's also known as a repeat offender, but even more so, Gannon Burr. So if Gannon Burr isn't also going to be treated that way, because it's not really realistic to have volunteers stop with stopwatches on every hole, and also it makes having a shot clock like that really takes away from the sport, in my opinion. It's a struggle because disc golf is always going to be somewhat of a gentleman's game. You have to, there's just a lot of unspoken rules, and there has to be just a respect amongst card mates to follow the rules. However, when there is somebody who's a repeat offender, and when you know for a fact that the card is way behind pace, then there needs to be enforcement. That's what I'm definitely for that. Okay, now there's a course marshal out there who can go to that group and say, "Hey guys, you guys start picking it up." And then if they don't start picking it up, "Hey guys, guess what? Now you haven't picked it up. I'm going to be out here timing you." That. I think there's just a progression like that.
I think that's
because that can happen within 2 holes. First hole, you need to pick it up. Second hole, didn't pick it up. Okay, I'm going to start timing you because, Gannon Burr was taking. I mean, it just comes down to it. Almost every shot, he's violating the PDGA rules. I mean, there were shots, people were timing them. People were apparently sending text messages to Brian Earhart, who was there, timing the players. Because, they were just well in excess of the amount of time they have. Reddit was going nuts about it. Jeremy Colling was another player who spoke out about it. He actually... I believe this was a Facebook post, but he basically said, this is his idea for how they should fix things. He said, "In my opinion, the Disc Golf Pro Tour, Silver Series, and Majors should have an altered set of rules that translates better to the level of play on tour," which we've said a lot of times in this podcast. I have a suggestion regarding the potential change to the 30-second rule. A, each player is permitted 45 seconds to throw. The same rules are applied as when that time begins. B, each player is permitted 2 extensions per round, which they must announce themselves before the 45 seconds is up, at which point they are getting an extra 30 to 45 seconds to perform their throw. C,
interesting.
If any player goes over their allotted 45 seconds without announcing an extension, a time violation can then be called and must be seconded, at which point the player receives automatic 1-stroke penalty. He said, "We are professionals. We need to hold ourselves more accountable. I realize in the end it still comes down to players officiating one another. I'm also aware of the uncomfortable position we're in when we should be calling the rules on our buddies when they break the rules. I'm not even going to pretend like I'm not guilty of letting this rule slide. Heck, usually several times around. I will, however, say something when a player is egregiously taking advantage of any other rule. There is an automatic stroke attached to the prospect of deliberately neglecting the rules. I believe it may aid some players who are developing a more sound routine." I think this makes sense to me.
I think that makes a lot of sense.
I hate that there has to be this kind of structure around the thing to that to me is so I'm a fast player, and there are a lot of people out there that are fast players, but I understand why some players take their time more, and when Gannon Burr is lining up an upshot that's going to decide his tournament essentially, I get it. But if it gets so bad, because my second issue I was going to bring up was that group ahead of them got into the clubhouse so much ahead of them. Like it should be the group ahead of them should be finishing up hole 18, and then they should be getting to the next group should be getting to hole 18 like pretty soon, because now the broadcast, you've got a lot of golf where it is one group, so you are waiting so much, and they can't fill it with the chase card, so like that becomes a problem for the broadcast. And people are now going after live disc golf. Like we try so hard on this podcast and in general to like support live disc golf, but when you have really slow pace of play like that and they can't fill it with anything, because like I don't care if they're playing slow, but I'm just seeing other shots. But when you can't fill it with anything, it's just dead space. That really hurts the broadcast. I think that what Big Germ was saying, it does make some sense. The rules would be tricky. It just goes back to the same thing though, where it's like calling your card mates on rules is never going to be really an effective way to marshal the sport, because some people just aren't going to want to do it. So I think that there just needs to be a set amount of marshals on the course. And I think they need to be there for a couple reasons. I think they need to be able to be called over to make a decision. I think they need to be called over in case of time, like keeping track of that thing. I think it's just it surprises me that it isn't already in place.
It's just hard because like the rules are so mushy that like even just the fact that it's when they have would they have addressed their lie?
When they've had ample time to address it or something like that.
Yeah,
there's a lot of ambiguous words.
And so like
it's just golf rules.
How do you can argue all of them? Like I hadn't addressed my lie yet. Like,
yeah.
And so I think that one thing that is helping with this I think that what's going to help with this is that we are starting to see more repercussions for it.
Yeah.
Because that's like with everything, is that like the moment that you start actually having consequences for these smaller rules being broken, the more that people will take rules seriously.
For sure.
Because like if Gannon Burr is called for it one time, he's a nice guy. He's not going to be like, he's not going to fight it. He's going to be like, oh, I need to probably learn how to. We're not called for it. He's been called for it.
Yeah.
But like, I don't know. I honestly think that I don't think it's realistic, but the whole timing thing, like where there's like a clock or something, because sometimes you just don't realize you're taking long.
Yeah. Well, here's the deeper issue is that the players who I've noticed that are struggling with this, the Nikos and the Gannon, it is a mental battle they're fighting. It is not deliberate. It's clearly obvious.
And that clock will not help.
they have, ticks in their routine, like picking up the chalk bag. Like there's things that are going on to where they're just processing things and time is not working the same way. So that's where it gets really hard, is because like those players are basically just, if time becomes more of a push, those players are going to have to work harder than a lot of other players to develop a routine that gets them making decisions quicker. I like what Colin was saying about the extensions. Like I hate having that much logistics in a disc golf round. Like, let me declare a time extension. But like the way a disc golf round should work in a perfect world is that players get to their throw normally and get their lie, they throw pretty quickly, because like a lot of times you have time to decide because you're walking to your throw, you're walking to the next tee, other people are throwing before you, like you have time. So in a perfect world, most of your throws during a round should happen really quick, and then there should be some times where it takes a bit longer, or you second guess yourself picking, and then that should be fine because it should balance itself out. So like that is how golf is meant to happen, and it stinks that like there are players who are too slow, and this happens on the PGA Tour. Like there are players who
I was going to ask what do they do there?
There are players that are notoriously slow on the PGA Tour, but there are also marshals on the course that will speed them up if they have to.
Okay.
So that's what stinks about it, is because like, let's say I'm a player who plays literally every single shot in 5 to 10 seconds the whole round, and then the one time I need like a little, like literally a minute instead of 45 seconds to like figure out my shot. I can't have it, or like like with the extension thing, like I already used my 2 extensions, like that's where it stinks, because like. But I mean, what happened this weekend? It was pretty bad. People were very upset about it, and like it just wasn't a good look overall.
It is the thing it comes down to is like I think it's not just a pace of play is huge for it. That is a big deal. But it is an advantage, because every shot you walk up to is a puzzle, and you are discovering the best way to solve it, because if you're scrambling and you've got 30 seconds, you're addressing your lie, and you might just be really good at addressing everything to where in 30 seconds you can figure out, oh, there's a hole up in the trees. If I get this, oh no, if I move this way, okay, well this log is in my way, so if I move that, like there are ways to, it's kind of like professional Rubik's Cube solvers.
Yeah.
They uncover the Rubik's Cube while it's all mixed up, and they have a minute, I think, to look at the Rubik's Cube, touch it, and look at it. Or maybe 30 seconds
it's
that they have to like basically address their lie as Rubik's Cube and look at. I'm not a huge Rubik's Cube person, so that I don't.
No, I like this analogy.
But they look at it and then they put it down, and they only have that much time. Then they start and they solve it.
Right.
And then it's the same thing. If one guy, has 30 seconds to look at his Rubik's Cube, the other guy's 2 minutes. The 2 minutes helps because you can think through how to solve it better.
Yeah.
It's the same way in disc golf. If you have more time to think about what you're going to throw, and you're not a mental case, it's gonna help you because you can actually discover different lines and stuff. So it is an advantage.
I think it's just it's difficult for some people to grasp, and even myself, because essentially what we're describing with this universal time limit that's enforced on every shot is, like you're saying, is essentially like a new part of disc golf, which is now like speed lie assessing.
Yeah.
It's no longer like just can you throw shots well. Now it's can you find lines in a quick amount of time so you get your throw off in time. And that's a very weird line for the sport of golf. Like it's very atypical for golf because it's always been a sport that governs itself and like just is kind of loosey-goosey with rules like that because people are just expected to follow them because it's just part of the respect of the game. It's part of the etiquette. Like whenever you have a sport like golf that's so heavy in etiquette, there's always going to be stuff that is weird. Because like, for instance, like if you're golfing with your buddy and you step in his line for a putt, now I don't know this for sure, but I'm pretty sure that's not a actual rule violation. However, it is etiquette. You don't do that because you could mess up his lie.
Gotcha.
Now, if that's not a rule, could somebody purposely step in somebody's line on the tour? Or let's just keep it in the scope of you with your buddy. And you and your buddy, you're not going to think he just broke a rule, but he's abusing something that's part of etiquette. So this is kind of like where the time falls right now, because even though there is a rule, it's kind of always been treated as like an etiquette situation. So that's just the difficult thing with golf, and it's hard, and it'll evolve in whatever way the PDGA and the Pro Tour decides to make it. I'll be curious to see what they do about it, but I prefer keeping it self-governed, keeping it the way it is, and then calling officials over if necessary.
If there's multiple problems.
Right. If there's problems,
I think
then
that
we
makes
start
the most sense.
Like we don't need, because like not everybody needs to have a clock held up by a board over their head to throw their shot.
Well, because the more like technical ways that they use to solve the problem, the more technicalities can get involved, and the more imagine a player just misses getting his throw off by 1 second and then loses like worlds because of it. Like how stupid would we feel as a sport? Even something where like a player is try like they're at their lie, they're about to throw, but they like slip and fall and hurt themselves. Yeah. And they've got 5 seconds left to throw where they're getting a violation.
It just it sounds so gimmicky to me imagining a player rushing to get their throw off. Like I would
my gosh.
Yeah, like that to me is so stupid.
It was out of my hand before the buzzer went off.
Yeah, and then they're like, oh, you started the clock? No, I didn't really address my lie yet. Like, no, like restart the clock. Like now that I'm thinking about it, we cannot do that.
True. Whenever you talk about it like that, it's more bizarre.
It gets sketchy.
I'm interested to hear in comments what opinions are about that, because I don't even have a firm opinion on it because there's so many. There's devil's advocate for like every single solution.
You know what they need to do is so in minor league baseball, like further down the leagues, what they'll do a lot of times is test rules that they are thinking about using for Major League Baseball, like bigger bases, pitching, like clocks where you have to throw in a certain amount of time. And a lot of the stuff does eventually get implemented. It's almost like Silver Series events. They should start using for that kind of stuff.
That's a good idea.
Like, should we mess around with a bigger circle for this event? Should we mess around with this? Now, Silver Series events probably mean too much at this point, but there could be maybe in the future if there's events that are a little bit lower down. But I think that could be I think the best way to experiment with rules is to actually use them in events. So anyways, we
should have one major, every.
It's just the experimental major.
It couldn't be a
Couldn't
major.
be a major, no.
But we should have one term. It's almost let it take the place of what's the useless one.
The match play.
Yeah,
The
let it
useless
take
one.
place of that, and it can be like what we would call it, like what's a way to progressive rules tournament or something like
Yeah.
that, where it's like
What rules would you implement?
Well, you could bigger circle, smaller baskets.
I would say I would definitely do smaller baskets.
Do a
and
time,
bigger circle.
do a clock on each throw.
Shirts, clock shirts on everybody.
Clock shirts. And stuff like that. I think would be.
It would be fascinating. Maybe we could run it because it wouldn't be PDGA sanctioned.
Required pants.
Required pants. We'll run the event because it won't be PDGA sanctioned. So we just need to get a hold of some margin baskets. We're good to go.